The battlefield. There are some key things I think are a good lesson in order to keep your spiritual life going strong. First of all, pray every day. Whether it's spontaneous prayer with the Lord or it's formal prayer, it's a good way to get started in this area. You can also pray using the scriptures, for example, Old New Testaments, any other spiritual writings based on the scriptures, writings from the saints can also really help improve building up your soul, and not only your soul but your mind and your intellect, and it helps inform you more about the necessities in order to evangelize and preach the gospel. Another thing I would say is, besides prayer, whether it's spontaneous or formal, and reading, is, I would say, go to Mass often, daily Mass, not just the holy days of obligation, and not just for special feast days. And I understand it's harder to get to Mass in the weekdays than it is Sundays, because they provide so many opportunities for Sundays. But that does not make it impossible to go on the weekdays. Some parishes do offer more lenient, reasonable times to help accommodate the working man or woman in order to fulfill. Like, I used to work back before my wife got injured, and daily Mass in the evening was a lot more attendable than the morning, because I had to be at work practically at the earliest time possible where Mass could have conveniently started, which was 6:30 or 7 a.m. in the morning. So that didn't always work for me. So I always tried to find a way to go to evening Mass, or even on my days off, I'd still go to an afternoon Mass when I could. I found what was more convenient. The Rosary, again, it's also prayer. It's basically meditating on the Scriptures. As you pray the Rosary, you're meditating on the Scriptures and the Christocentric value of the source of the Scriptures, the Word, basically, the Logos, the Word incarnate, Jesus. The Rosary is a meditation on the entire life of Jesus, from his birth to his ministry years, to his sorrowful passion and his death, and ultimately to his resurrection, and to the birth of the church. So these are good avenues to focus on, to help try to improve yourself. I understand it's not always easy. It's not always easy for any of us. We have to try to figure out how to work this in. When I take a look at the spiritual literature that I received, there's a ton of it, and I haven't read it all. But I have read some of it, and it's very informative and very powerful, especially on Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's work on some of his encyclicals and some of his writings based on the Church Fathers and things like that. Very informative. And also, if you want to know and stay close to orthodoxy, what has been consistently believed throughout the 2,000 years of Christianity, of particularly Catholicism, is study the Church Fathers, study the doctors of the Church. And you don't have to go through extensive details, but you can just read like a handful, maybe like read 5 well-known ones, if you can, all from particular timelines and centuries of the Church's existence, and you will find very notable Catholic positions on what has been believed and consistently believed in all the way going back to the apostolic age, which is the generation of Christ himself walking on earth. Prayer, going to Mass, the Rosary, reading the Church Fathers. There's a lot more, and reading good spiritual books, basically, to get you prepared, basically, because when I look at topics now, like based on the Spanish Inquisition or the Crusades or the Reformation in some cases, the information that I've discovered and looked up, I've noticed that when people bring up the stereotypical refuting points of these particular eras that have happened in the church, you get that, you get that because you know better now about what truly happened. And one of those instances is the Galileo case. Galileo's case is completely misunderstood by most of the media, and is very often exaggerated. So when you get moments like that, or to the Spanish Inquisition, you're like, okay, so how do you defend that? With being informed, knowledge-wise, how to refute that. And sometimes the spiritual life, we've got to also pick our battles too. In the other video I said there's the big battles and then there's the smaller battles. We've got to know which ones are actually worth fighting for at the time. Because there may be other ways of fighting. Sometimes a one-on-one discussion is more fruitful, less embarrassing, because often topics like this, discussing spirituality, discussing Catholicism, especially since you don't know who you're talking to, a lot of the times who are discussing these points, can be very embarrassed or very antagonistic in some ways. So it's very prudent to figure out, okay, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? Choosing your battles wisely, and knowing, and this is something I'm guilty of this just as much as probably anyone else, is what is bait? What is just being posted on social media, or what is just being posted out there online that is just trying to bait you into starting a conversation with a particular person that you know probably isn't going to go anywhere. The words of St. Francis of Assisi are still very true today. If you preach the gospel, and if you have to, use words. In other words, preaching by your actions, preaching by your living lifestyle, is far more powerful most of the time than using words. However, that does not negate that this is a negating factor when it comes to actually preaching the gospel, preaching the truth. The truth does have to be proclaimed. Jesus did it perfectly, and he still got flack for it. I mean, that's just the nature of the human race. So the human race is going to complain either way what you do, no matter which direction you go. Either if you're too silent on it, or if you talk too much about it. But if you can find a happy medium, that's a very good thing. Often Catholicism and often the spiritual life is moderation, and figuring out, not going too far right or too far left. We're going down the center, long, narrow path. You go along the long, narrow path, which is the path that leads to life. That's the road you want to be on. Remember, far and wide, and broad wide is the path that leads to destruction. And many find it. The long, narrow path, difficult path, is very difficult. Few find it, but that is the path that leads to salvation. Pray the rosary, study scripture, study the writings of the saints, the church fathers, the doctors. Immerse yourself. Pray for zeal, too, that you may be passionate about growing in your faith. Pray that you have this zeal and that it can't be contained, because the light, I mean, Jesus said, what good is the light if you put a basket over it? It's good for nothing. I mean, when you have light in you, the nature of light, as you can tell from this room, radiates the entire room. It wants to spread. It wants to go to places. You can't keep it in here like this and expect it to grow. It's got to kaboom, go. I mean, all around. Let the faith grow. Ask God, obviously, for guidance. Guidance in what to do. Prudence with humility. Prudence to know the fullness of the truth. And the humility to know when to speak and when not to speak. When to be silent and refrain from comments, and when to extraordinarily express the faith in all its glory and beauty. God bless.